To have you with me today. The phone number 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Delighted. We got to get going. The founders of this country, the founders of our country were no fans of democracy. That's why people get upset when you say democracy instead of republic. Some people do. People of a certain breed, you know who they are, get upset. Now, the reality is that the Greeks used the word democracy. The Romans used the word republic. There were slight variations of them, but they were essentially the same thing. But, we're a republic, we're not a democracy. Well, we're a republic with democratic components. It's complicated. It's language. The early church fought for years over how to describe the Trinity. And they ultimately settled on a Greek word that essentially, and I forget the word now that I'm talking about it, but essentially is one person in a Greek play would wear multiple masks, and it was the same body, but it was three different persons on stage, and they used that word. And the reason they used that word is because the Romans had a word similar to it, and they had to find something that could be translated across languages. They had to be. Was it persona? Was the Greek? I can't remember now. Here I'm trying to grab for it and look for it. And in any event, you get the point. The Greeks and the Romans had different words that meant similar things, if not exact things. And so we scream and complain now in conservative circles. It's the most frustrating thing to me, honestly, because it has become a pet peeve. People who just yell when you say we've got to defend our democracy. We're a republic. We're a republic. I mean, go back and watch Price is Right, old person. You know what I'm talking about, and the fact that you're a nitpicks. Well, there's a word that rhymes with that. But our founders didn't like democracy as constructed by the Greeks, the direct democracy. They decided to go with the Roman Republican style, where individuals gave representatives the power to choose for them instead of the Greek direct democracy. The Romans version was a representative democracy, where the Roman citizens would elect people to go represent them in the Roman Senate. The Greeks, in Athens at least, in the early days of democracy, it was all the people showed up and considered things. And that's what the founders didn't like. They didn't like mob rule. They didn't like rule by the majority. They did not like the mob being able to bully and badger people into getting their way. So they set up a government that had three branches. Ironically, the least powerful was the third. It is not accurate to say that they just put them three co-equal branches. They put the most preeminent, prominent, powerful branch first, giving it the power of the purse. That would be the people. The chief executive was a lesser role, supposed to be, and then the judiciary, the most minor. They were in ranked order. They certainly had checks and balances between them to control each other's sphere of influence over time that has merged and moved and morphed. Now the president is arguably the most powerful branch, in large part because the first branch of government has ceded all control to the second branch. And the reason the third branch has gotten as powerful as it is that the first two branches like the idea of being able to blame the unelected judges for decisions. So they have allowed the third branch to become as powerful as it is. It's an abdication of the first two roles. But all of this is still better than having the mob control things. In Britain, for the longest time, up until the late 20th century, whatever Parliament passed was law. If a majority passed it, it was law. For the longest time, the Crown had a veto, but it is now rarely exercised unless Parliament itself decides to get the monarch to exercise it. Queen Elizabeth vetoed legislation last year, as a matter of fact, but it was done so at the behest of Parliament when they found an error in the legislation. She didn't do it herself. We in this country have a series of checks and balances that mitigate the mob, and yet the left in particular, but also some on the right, would much prefer mob rule these days. They would much prefer that their side be completely in charge because they see the other side as the enemy. Maxine Waters risks Derek Chauvin getting out of jail with her comments. The judge in Minnesota did not declare a mistrial, but said it may give grounds on appeal. Maxine Waters went and essentially said they need to burn the city down if they don't get their way. If Black Lives Matter does not get its way, they need to burn the city down. She denied it later, but she said it. She said it. It was caught on film. Nancy Pelosi has defended her. The mob wants justice, and only their preferred outcome will be what they consider. I want to be upfront and honest with you. I think Derek Chauvin should go to prison. I do not necessarily think he murdered George Floyd. He was a police officer acting in the line of duty. I do think he used excessive force. Having his knee on that man's neck for almost 9 minutes, clearly after George Floyd had stopped struggling, refused to allow a paramedic to examine him, refused to take his knee off of him, refused to allow others to see him. When the ambulance arrived, as he was unresponsive, still refused to get his knee off George Floyd's neck. I think that Derek Chauvin did bad, and I think he will be punished, and I think he should be punished. I don't necessarily think it's murder, in large part because he was a police officer on the job. George Floyd did have a history that police officers did take into account, and he did have behavior then and there on the scene that necessitated him being restrained like that, at least initially. But after about the 5th minute, it clearly was inexcusable, and something should happen. But the idea that the mob should stand ready to burn down the city of Minneapolis if the mob does not get its way, the idea that the mayor of or the governor of Illinois has had to call out the National Guard to prevent riots, the idea that Maxine Waters should be able to get a pass on saying burn down the city if they don't get their way, the idea that Marjorie Taylor Greene should be considered possibly ousted from Congress because she didn't support the Electoral College vote and other things that caused the Democrats to want to boot her out of Congress, but give Maxine Waters a pass, is a bit too much for me. I'm not a fan of Marjorie Taylor Greene, nor am I of Maxine Waters. I think they're about the same person. But the idea that the Democrats would give Waters a pass and condemn Marjorie Taylor Greene for the things she does is staggeringly hypocritical. More importantly, the media has so internalized January 6th, which I myself think was a terrible day. Yes, there were peaceful protesters, but yes, you cannot deny that there were also malicious people who intended to harm members of Congress. And no, it wasn't Antifa. I apologize for shaking you out of your mythology. It was not Antifa. It was people who supported the president of the United States, then Donald J. Trump. They were in the minority, but they did try to cause harm. They did try to storm through a door and grab members of Congress. They did erect a noose. But you know what? They didn't burn down Washington, D.C. They went to Congress, and the fact that the media was saying, oh, January 6th, that is terrible, terrible, January 6th, awful. We can't have any, this was an affront to our democracy. No, there on the streets of Minneapolis, there's your affront to democracy. On the streets of Portland, Oregon, there's your affront to democracy. On the streets of Chicago, Illinois, there's your affront to democracy. On the streets of Washington, D.C. and New York City, in Baltimore, Maryland, and around the country, the mob wanting to burn down their cities if a jury doesn't give them what they want. There is your affront to democracy. And the fact that you're so fixated on January 6th, you can't even call this out, is why nobody trusts you. When the mob decides it's going to burn down the city if they don't get their way, the American media should be standing up against the mob. Instead, they're too busy fluffing them. Listen to this from Maxine Waters, or not from Maxine Waters, from Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Ignore. That's what happened in Nazi Germany, Lindsay. The supposedly benign, more softer Nazism at the beginning ultimately led to the Holocaust. And so if you don't knock down the outrageous, racist, most really evil beliefs of Republicans and anyone like this, then we will live to repeat the discrimination and persecution of minorities or people who are deemed other in the future. And that's what Never Again is all about. And, you know, I'm very careful about not making comparisons, but when you have to, when you see this racism and the ownership of that only one race, only one people are acceptable, that's when you start to go down a very dark path.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz comparing Republicans to Nazis and tying them to the Holocaust. Racist, all of them, you know. Racists. This is what the Democrats think of the Republicans. Republicans think no better of the Democrats. Both sides see each other as the enemy. Only one side is in the streets of major American cities trying to burn it down. There is only one side in this country that when it doesn't get its way, small businesses suffer because they turn to ash and rubble. There's only one side in this country when they don't get their way, burns down American cities, smashes cop cars, beats people up in the streets. The media is so fixated on the supposed rise of white supremacy in this country that they refuse to even cover this. There is a jury deliberating facts. I suspect they will conclude that Derek Chauvin should go to jail for what he did. If they do not, cities will burn. Lives will be destroyed, if not taken. Businesses certainly will be destroyed and turned to rubble. And the American media wants to give a pass to all of it. It's understandable anger, you see. Either the system works or it doesn't. And what the media has been doing over the last decade is been complicit with people like Barack Obama and others to say that the system doesn't work. To some degree, I think some of these people would love it if there were violent riots that turned into mass chaos around this country so they could wash their hands of it and say, well, see, time to start over with our socialist paradise. Got to get rid of the Constitution. But, you know, there are people on the right who want the same thing, who've decided the Constitution doesn't work. I hear this on the right as much as I hear on the left these days. A bunch of people who've decided that the Constitution no longer works and we need to start over again and we need to be the ones to decide the common good. No. Trust the American people, not the ones rioting in the streets, not the ones storming the Capitol on January 6th. The vast array of American people who show up every day at their job without complaint and do their job and go home and want to live their lives and then show up on election day and vote. Trust those people. The fact that neither side wants to trust the American people because they might lose something they've decided is more sacred than the Republic. Their version of whatever the hell the common good is, whatever it is, and it changes on a daily basis. It changes culturally all the time. We are a broken people. We really are broken people. We all fall short of the glory of God. We're a broken people. But my goodness, the fact that you've got some contingent in this country justifying what happened on January 6th and pretending it was no big deal. And now you've got an even larger contingent of people on the side of the American press turning a blind eye to the fact that mobs may burn down America if a jury doesn't give them their way. Trust the jurors. They're the real Americans here. Trust the American people, not the mob. And the fact that any of you think that you should be able to impose your common good on others, you're not behaving a whole lot more different than those who are willing to burn down cities if they don't get their way. You're not trusting the American people. And these people in Minneapolis, in Portland, in Washington, D.C., in New York City, in Chicago, and every other major city should fundamentally be condemned for what they're doing. And the fact that the American media won't, while they're hyping up fear porn over the vaccine, is just another good reminder that nobody trusts the media. And perhaps we need some reboots in this country, but not at the constitutional system, but at the level of who do we listen to and who do we trust. And it should begin by not trusting mobs.
Want to be on the show? Call Eric now at 8
Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, you're more than welcome to call in with your thoughts and questions primarily. Rocco's is having their first annual Rockin' Affair. It's going to be May 1st and 2nd. It's going to be 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. This is free to the public. If you've been wanting to get out of town, if you want to take a little bit of a trip, go to North Georgia. Go to Jasper. It's close to LJ. It's close to Blue Ridge. Jasper in and of itself has all sorts of great stuff there. And this is going to be completely free. There's going to be music. There's going to be food. There's going to be a children's area. It's free admission to the public. It is at Rocco's Jasper. You can go to roccosjasper.com. I think they may have closed out vendors. They may be able to squeeze you in if you got something you want to participate with and show and share. You can go to roccosjasper.com and find that out. But Reformation Brewery is going to be there. Coca-Cola is going to be there. Jasper Jeep's going to be there. Partners at Pickens Pets is going to be there. It is a wide variety of music. They've got a great menu. It's biker friendly, by the way. This is for those of you who, my wife's got a Harley. She loves to ride her motorcycle. It is a beautiful drive to Jasper, Georgia. And if you want to plan a trip and get to Rocco's on May 1st and 2nd, again, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., it's Rocco's first annual Rockin' Affair. You can be outside. You don't have to wear a mask. The weather will be warm and beautiful, and you can go to Rocco's, have a great time. The food there is great. It's a fantastic venue if you've never been up there. And again, it's just, if you want an excuse to get out of town and do something fun that's also free for you and your family, go to Rocco's up in Jasper. roccosjasper.com is the website for more details. It's May 1st and 2nd. There will be food. There will be music. There will be a children's area. It's family friendly. It's biker friendly. Head on up to Rocco's in Jasper. And thank you to them for sponsoring the program. If you want to get in on sponsoring this program, reach out to us, please. And I say this in all due haste for you because ad rates will be going up shortly as we are about to pick up some stations. So if you want to get in before rates go up, now's the time to advertise. Y'all, I am not surprised at the media antagonism towards Ron DeSantis. He has signed what is being considered the nation's strongest anti-riot law. The libertines, not the libertarians, the libertines, they call themselves libertarians, but they're all about having a good time. They don't care about the government. I thought you thought smaller was better and home rule was good. Well, DeSantis has put his signature on a bill, an anti-rioting bill. Ironically, it's HB1. HB1. It's not a voting rights bill. It's an anti-rioting bill. What it would do is it would require that any county or city that wants to dramatically defund police in Florida will have to have state administrative review to get permission, and also that it will stiffen penalties for riots, and particularly the organizers of riots. Here's DeSantis.
I think what we've seen what the left does is they concoct narratives. They don't really have any facts to support the narratives because I can give you a copy of the bill. Show me. They can't do that. So they try to run with narratives thinking that somehow that's going to help them politically. But I can tell you in this instance, it's backfired on them. The people of Florida are with us on this. They don't want to see disorder in the streets. They don't want to see their lives or livelihoods jeopardized by some crazed mob. And so we did the right thing. But here's the thing. What Republicans and conservatives need to do, stop wilting to the left. You know, if they come and call you names, so what? That means you're winning if they do that. So stay the course, hold the line, and get things done for the people of your cities or your states.
Amen and amen and amen. Stop wilting to the left. Stop cowering. And stop trying to use this so clever argument that, well, I thought you believed that the governance closest to you was the best, and if a city in your state wants to defund the police, you should let them know, because you know what it does? It sparks crime waves elsewhere. At some point, we got to understand that cities are administrative subdivisions of states, and yes, we should give cities a lot of latitude. But then when they want to drive up crime rates that spread across city boundaries, you know what criminals don't pay attention to? Where the city boundary is. Good for the governor for doing this, and terrible for the Democrats and the media for not condemning the mob violence that is happening around this country in the name of Black Lives Matters. Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I'm in the middle of the commercial break. A doctor's appointment of mine got moved to tomorrow, so now I'm scrambling to rearrange things. All right, we must continue, shall we? The Black Lives Matter protesters. Y'all, this is a perfect segue into the squad. The Black Lives Matter protesters, you know, a man was shot and killed by police in Portland, Oregon. I thought this was not true. But it's true. I have confirmed this is true. Yesterday, I mentioned that the Oregonian newspaper announced that the shooting victim was white, and they went out of their way to say, we never identify the race of someone, but here we feel we need to, in light of these Black Lives Matter protests, we need them to know this guy was not black. Well, Black Lives Matter protesters showed up in Portland, Oregon to protest and begin burning the city down. And when they found out the guy was white, they got their cars and went home. No, I'm not making it up. It really happened. They showed up in downtown Portland, Black Lives Matters, loaded for bear. And the police were like, he was white. He was white. He was white. Don't burn us down. He was white. And they're like, oh, our bad. My goodness. My goodness. I mean, this is the new strategy for the police when Black Lives Matter show up. He was white. He was white. He identified as white. We're pretty sure. Oh, my gosh. How pathetic. Speaking of, that leads me to the pathetic nation. Oh, no. Speaking of Black Lives Matter first, Breonna Taylor's mother has had enough. Breonna Taylor, who was killed, where was it, in Kentucky, I think? Her mother has given an interview and basically said, none of these people were here for my daughter. None of these people were here holding my hand. None of these people were here demanding justice until it got into national headlines, and now they're fundraising off of my daughter. I wanted to stop. She is not happy. Of course she's not. I mean, and the Hollywood Foreign Press Association president is probably getting fired because he referred to them as a hate group led by a self-admitted Marxist. And in Hollywood, you're not allowed to tell the truth anymore. That guy's probably going to be tossed. And that gets to the hypocrisy of the squad. The squad has decided that it needs police protection. Even as it wants to defund the police. The Daily Caller, Henry Rogers, has this. Members of the progressive Democrat group in Congress called The Squad, who have been pushing to defund the police, spent thousands of dollars on private security for themselves, according to the Federal Election Commission records. FEC records show Democrats New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Minnesota Representative Ilhan Omar, Massachusetts Representative Ayanna Pressley, and Missouri Representative Cori Bush each spent thousands of dollars on their own security. The payments were described in the FEC filings as either security or security services. In January 2020, Ocasio-Cortez criticized New York City's proposed billion-dollar cuts from the police department, saying it did not go far enough. Defunding police means defunding police, Ocasio-Cortez said in a statement. It does not mean budget tricks or funny math. It does not mean moving school police officers from the New York Police Department budget to the Department of Education budget, so the exact same police remain in schools. During a June 2020 Instagram Live, Ocasio-Cortez said America would look like a suburb if the police lost funding across the country. Affluent white communities already live in a world where they choose to fund youth, health, housing, etc., more than they fund police. In January, February, March of 2021, Ocasio-Cortez spent $3,000 per month on a security consultant. Records show she spent $9,000 for 3 months on security consulting for one company. She spent $24,279.13 on security on January 25th. She spent $3,986.60 on security January 19th, using campaign money to do so. Omar, who is also supports defunding the police, spent $3,103.61 on her own security in the state of Minnesota. And Ayanna Pressley as well has spent over $4,000 for her own security when she's traveling, going about in her own state. So They can use their campaign cash to fund their police protection, but they do not want taxpayer money being spent on police for you and me. At the same time, man, Ayanna Pressley continues to be a hypocrite. She wants writ cancellation. She wants to defund the police while using her campaign money to hire her own personal security. And she's called for writ cancellation legislation. It says it's literally a matter of life or death. She and her husband have made as much as $15,000 in rental income in 2019 after purchasing a $658,000 Boston home, according to property records and financial disclosures reviewed by the Washington Free Beacon. The income appears to come over the course of 4 months. The unit was first listed for $2,500 a month in June 2019, and the posting was removed in August. Pressley and her husband refinanced the building as a multifamily investment property in August 2020 that requires the couple to maintain rent loss insurance. Pressley's office did not return multiple requests for comment on whether the Democrat collected rent during the pandemic, and her real estate agent also did not return requests for comment. Even if Pressley waived rent when the pandemic hit, she could recoup the lost income through a bill she co-sponsored with fellow progressive representatives AOC and Ilhan Omar. The squad members introduced the Rent and Mortgage Cancellation Act in 2020 and 2021, which would require the federal government reimburse landlords for lost rent for the duration of the pandemic. The bill also uses taxpayer money to create a landlord relief fund that prioritizes landlords with the fewest available amount of assets, meaning Pressley and other minor leasers will more likely receive funds than large real estate firms. While supporting the bill, Pressley argued that rental payments force American families to choose between putting food on the table and keeping roof over their head. She and her husband earned roughly $400,000 in combined income in 2019, the Democrats' first financial disclosure showed. Now, I gotta tell you, I'm actually not opposed to reimbursing landlords for their losses during the pandemic because they haven't been able to evict people, even if those people stop paying their rent. I know multiple people who have been put out of business as landlords, filing for bankruptcy, among other things, because the federal government won't let them evict people from their property during the pandemic. So I think something should be done. But let's also note that they go beyond that with their positions. They don't think Americans should have to pay mortgages or rent, period. They think the government should be able to bail people out. And here she is as a landlord profiting, and not only that, offering up legislation that would reimburse her for her losses during the pandemic when she doesn't necessarily want to do that for other people. She is definitionally a hypocrite on this stuff, which is the definition of the socialists in the United States of America. They are always, always hostile to American values and capitalism and free enterprise. They are always hostile to the little guy, to the small business. They blast big business, but then they support policies that will sustain big business while hurting small business because they don't actually understand the way the business works. Like, you know, there's I forget the woman's name. She's an author. She wrote a biography of AOC. She's under attack for pointing out that, yes, while Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez certainly did work as a bartender before going to Congress, her family is actually way more privileged than AOC would have you know. And the fact that this author pointed that out has gotten her into trouble with the left for daring to shatter the mythology of AOC, formed out of the earth like Eve, except no Adam's rib, formed by God himself, the spirit animal who doesn't actually exist, to come forth 10 bars and tell us how to live our lives on Instagram. Not really the life that she wants us to believe she had. While they're also out there canceling people. By the way, that reminds me. The cancel culture mob that AOC and them have provoked, they've come for Home Depot. The activists, the voting rights activists have decided Home Depot must be the company boycotted because its owners are Jewish. They don't actually want to say that. What they're saying is Home Depot didn't fight enough against the voting rights bill in Georgia. Led by the AME Church in Georgia, activists, voting rights activists have decided Home Depot did not do enough. Now, Bernie Marcus and really, what's his name? Oh my gosh, Arthur Blank. My mind went blank for a minute. Sorry. Too much caffeine and not enough at the same time. So the founders of Home Depot spoke out against the voting reforms. Arthur Blank in particular also owns the Atlanta Falcons, took a very strident stand. Home Depot's leadership spoke out against the legislation, but they didn't do enough, apparently. Never mind that Delta released a statement praising the legislation and then walked it back. Never mind that Coke and Delta refused to sign on to that statement in the New York Times. Home Depot, the one company whose founders were Jewish, that has nothing to do with it, I'm sure, decided that Home Depot must be boycotted for not doing enough about standing up for Georgia's voting laws. The reality is Home Depot wouldn't have been able to stop it either. The reality is there's no way that the Democrats or corporations were going to stop the Republicans from passing this. None. And yet, Home Depot's got to be punished. China is looking to punish its citizens. It's not really a coincidence that the left in this country is behaving more and more like China. We've got Twitter in this country where you can find people to cancel for being heretics. China is developing a new app so that people can turn in their neighbors who have mistaken opinions or deny the excellence of socialist culture. China's launched a new app. It allows citizens to report others who criticize the ruling Communist Party or question its account of history online. Released by China's cyber regulator, along with a similar hotline, the app aims to crack down on historical nihilists. Ahead of the party's 100th anniversary in July, the regulator said. An arm of Cyberspace Administration of China, CAC, said the app and hotline will allow and encourage netizens to report fellow internet users who spread mistaken opinions online in order to create a good public opinion atmosphere. Such offenses would include distorting the party's history, attacking its leadership and policies, defaming national heroes, and deny the excellence of advanced socialist culture online. For a while now, some people with ulterior motives have spread historically nihilistic false statements online, maliciously distorting, slandering, and denying party, national, and military history in an attempt to confuse people's thinking. We hope that the majority of internet users will actively play their part in supervising society and enthusiastically report harmful information. They got Twitter. China just got their own version of Twitter. It's what Twitter's for. You know, we look at this and we think, well, this is kind of appalling. But we're doing it in this country. How many people have turned in people for not wearing masks in this country? How many people turn in their neighbors for slights? How many people in this country report others on social media for bad behavior they don't like? It happens. It happens. The Chinese just put it at the state level. If the wokes got their way, it would be at the state level of this country. But to some degree, it's even more terrifying in this country because it's at the corporate level. And the First Amendment doesn't apply to corporations in this country, so the wokes are using corporations as their enforcement mechanism to cancel opinions they don't like. You don't like the conservative host? Get the corporations to cancel their ad buy. You don't like the individual? Get Facebook and Twitter to block them from the internet. You don't like what a state's doing? Get corporations to pull their business out of the state. There's not a whole lot of difference. You know, corporatism and fascism go hand in hand, and the left is so busy screaming about people on the right being fascistic, they don't see themselves. Oh, they're pure as the driven snow. Hitler thought he was too. Oh, wait, can I say that? Because Debbie Wasserman Schultz is comparing Republicans to Nazis. Are we allowed to point out that the fascists and the Nazis and the communists, they always use corporations for their bidding? I mean, my goodness, in China, corporations in China are routinely used by the Communist Party to enforce their will, just like the wokes are doing here. Are we allowed to point that out? Or can you only say it if you throw Trump's name into the mix? Because it sure isn't Trump doing all this stuff.
News and in-depth analysis from Erick Erickson.
Did you know Mother's Day is around the corner? It's coming up quick. You better plan for Mother's Day. You can plan with Omaha Steaks. You can cook for your mother. I know cooking is something people don't do these days when you use the door services that drop off cold food from a restaurant at your house. You should cook. You should grill out. Omaha Steaks makes it easy. You can get the Let's Go Grill package. You can get steak. You can get pork chops. You can get boneless, skinless chicken breasts. They're really good. And you can get 12 burgers for free and your first order $20 off. You go to omahasteaks.com and you put Georgia in the search bar. Put Georgia in the search bar. You will see this fantastic package, 12 burgers for free. You can have your whole family over for a cookout for your mother. How can you not cook out for your mother? Shame on you if you don't take advantage of this package. omahasteaks.com. Georgia in the search bar. Grill for mom. You can make her steak, and then that sniveling little sibling twin of yours that you don't like, make them eat the burger, and you'll be feeding them glorious food, and they'll think you love them when really you're just not serving them the steak. Or feed them all the steak, feed them the chicken, feed them the pork chops, feed them all the burgers, grill out for mom for Mother's Day. You can't beat the quality at Omaha Steaks. You can't beat the value either. It's a great deal, and your mom won't think you're cheap. She'll think you're wonderful for getting Omaha Steaks. Go to omahasteaks.com and put Georgia in the search bar. Get this package. Grill out for mom for Mother's Day. Make it a family affair. Get out of the masks. Get in the backyard. Enjoy the weather. Enjoy the grill. Enjoy Omaha Steaks. Y'all, Richard Dawkins is being canceled. Richard Dawkins helped lead the New Atheist movement. Richard Dawkins is an evolutionary biologist and got British training. He has written a number of books that sank into popular culture about evolution and why he believes there is no God. He's been very militant. Behind the scenes, for years, he's been known to have some, crude views on women, let's just say that. He had wrote a book called The Blind Watchmaker. He wrote a book called The God Delusion. He's more or less these days a public intellectual more than he does science, but his background is evolutionary biology. In 1996, he was given an award by the American Humanist Association for his advocacy of atheism. The atheists are now rescinding the award. They want it back. What is Richard Dawkins' sin? Well, can you have any sin if you're an atheist? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. He compared people who identify as transgender to Rachel Dolezal, the white woman who identified as black. Some men choose to identify as women, and some women choose to identify as men. In 2015, Rachel Dolezal, a white chapter president of the NCAA, was vilified for identifying as black. You will be vilified if you deny that they really are what they identify as. Well, now he is really, he set off the wokes. And the American Humanist Association has to cancel his award. What they actually say in their statement is, established in 1953, the Humanist of the Year Award is conferred annually by the American Humanist Association, recognizing the awardee as an exemplar of humanist values. Communication of scientific concepts to the public is of an important aspect of advancing the cause of humanism. Richard Dawkins was honored in 1996 by the AHA as Humanist of the Year for his significant contribution in the area of explaining science to the public to advance the cause of humanism. Regrettably, Richard Dawkins has, over the last several years, accumulated a history of making statements that use the guise of scientific discourse to demean marginalized groups, an approach antithetical to humanist values. His latest statement implies the identities of transgender individuals are fraudulent, while also simultaneously attacking black identity as one that can be assumed when convenient, because he equated transgenders to Rachel Dolezal. So he's got to be canceled. He violated a faith belief. He violated a faith belief. For the atheists are now denouncing him as a heretic, and they want their award back because he violated their orthodoxy. Atheism itself is a religion, and this is just another bit of evidence towards that. They're canceling an atheist
30.
for not subscribing to a view. And interestingly enough, the group that flagged this is scientists say he's a evolutionary biologist. They're like, science says transgenderism is real. Like the anti-vaccine crowd says they've got scientists who say autism comes from vaccines. Same thing. But then the left gives credence to one and not the other. It's just fascinating to watch the atheists fight each other. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show. The phone number, should you wish to be a part of this here program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Y'all, I am going to go down a road that I suspect my producer will be yelling at me in my ear, telling me, stop, don't go, you're going to bore the crowd. And I'm going to do it anyway, because it's my show. We're going to talk religion. Not only are we going to talk religion, we're going to talk the internal dynamics of the Presbyterian Church in America. But wait, there's a higher purpose, I assure you. Listen, this is one of those segments, full disclosure, caveats out of the gate. I'm about to go down a monologue road, and you're going to wonder, what the hell is Erickson going on about today? And you're just going to have to bear with me. You're just going to have to bear with me, because I am about to tie a bunch of strings together like a conspiracy theorist, except it's not a conspiracy theory. I'm just tying stories together to build a complete narrative whole. Here we go. Are you ready? I warned a while back. I am a member of the Presbyterian Church in America. We put the fun in fundamentalism. Look, so, years ago you had the Presbyterian Church of the United States. Well, the liberals got involved and decided we needed female pastors. And every church that embraces female pastors eventually embraces gay pastors, eventually embraces gay marriage. It's just what happens when you decide that this little passage of the Bible can be redacted. Eventually you decide, well, we're going to take that one out too, and then we're going to take that one out, and pretty soon you've got a Bible that's just all redacted except Jesus loves, and you have no concept of what that actual love is. It's what happens on your way out the door. Mainline Protestantism and Episcopalianism are just pathways to atheism for people who aren't quite ready to get there yet. And the Presbyterian Church in the United States became a split. So you've got the PCA, which decided the Bible actually says what the Bible says, and it's true. And the PCUSA, which decided the Bible says what it says, and we'll pick and choose what we like and ignore the rest on their way into atheism. They're one of the fastest declining denominations in the country. The Episcopalians have long left Christianity. My goodness, those people. You've got Christians and Episcopalians, and never the two shall meet these days. In the PCUSA, they'll be headed there shortly. Well, in the PCA, you got problems. Again, you're going to have to bear with me here. So one of the most prominent theologians within the Presbyterian Church in America is a guy you have probably heard of, whether you're religious or not. His name is Tim Keller. He actually was on the program a couple of weeks ago for Good Friday. And Tim Keller has written pretty critically about critical theory as a justice concept. Critical theory comes from Marxist thought. That is not disputed. It has been embraced by Black Lives Matter, a group whose founders have explicitly called themselves Marxist. It's a group that, in its own words, wants to undermine two-parent nuclear households and Western prescribed families. Tim Keller wrote, postmodern critical theory argues, first, the explanation of all unequal outcomes in wealth, well-being, and power is never due to individual actions or to differences in cultures or to differences in human abilities, but only and strictly due to unjust social structures and systems. The only way to fix unequal outcomes for the downtrodden is through social policy, never by asking anyone to change their behavior or culture. And he goes on to point out that critical theory is central to it, like Marxism, that it's from, is control of language. He writes, language does not merely describe reality, it constructs or creates it. Power structures mask themselves behind the language of rationality and truth. So academia hides its unjust structures behind talk of academic freedom, and corporations behind talk of free enterprise, science behind talk of empirical objectivity, and religion behind the talk of divine truth. All of these seeming truth claims are really just constructed narratives designed to dominate, and as such, they must be unmasked. Reasoned debate and freedom of speech, therefore, is out, It only gives unjust discourses airtime. The only way to reconstruct reality in a just way is to subvert dominant discourses, and this requires control of speech. That's Tim Keller, highly, highly critical of critical theory. If you listen to my interview with him a few weeks ago, he said one of the biggest problems with the Black Lives Matter movement is it's a movement devoid of hope and full of division. And that while you can learn things from critical theorists, because we can learn something from everyone, critical theory itself is not something we should be embracing. It's bad. Well, he didn't say bad, but that it is antithetical to the Bible. Andrew Sullivan wrote this about critical theory. Just as this theory denies the individual, it also denies the universal. There are no universal truths, no objective realities, just narratives that are expressed in discourses and language that reflect one group's power over another. There is no distinction between objective truth and subjective experience because the former is an illusion created by the latter. So instead of an argument, you merely have an identity showdown in which the more oppressed always wins because that subverts the hierarchy. These discourses of power, moreover, never end. There's no progress as such, no incremental inclusion of more and more identities into a pluralist, liberal, unified project. There's just the permanent reality of the oppressor and the oppressed. And all that we can do is constantly expose and eternally resist these power structures on behalf of the oppressed. Now, to get a sense of all this, you need to know about Greg Thompson. He's a PCA elder, Presbyterian Church of America elder. He's collaborating with Grace DC up in Washington, D.C., pretty prominent PCA church. Thompson argues, after Keller's critique on critical theory, Thompson argued that you've got to be trained in critical theory to really be able to understand it. Just like the communists believe you got to be a communist to explain and understand communism, critical theorists believe you got to understand and be trained in and use critical theory to actually understand it. He defended Marxism, claiming that those who oppose critical theory have a tendency to willfully neglect the long tradition of Christian Marxists around the world, especially in the Catholic Church, and to traffic in the demonstrably false binary of Christian versus Marxist. Notice how he says it's demonstrably false. When in Marxism, a key tenet is a rejection of religion. That's not just communism. Marxism itself rejects religion. His entire pushback is amazing, made more so that he is a leader within the PCA. If you want to get a sense of his thoughts on this country, listen to this. This is from Greg Thompson as well. This is the same pastor.
Redemption, we have the promise that not only will God's presence be restored, and not only will our dignity be guarded, we have the promise that creation itself, this world, will be healed.
Now that's true. And then he goes on to say this.
Transformation is contextless. We talk about it as though it doesn't exist in an actual culture, with an actual history, with actual realities. But I want you to know that when you, as Americans here, people that are working or living in specifically in America, talk about restoring all things, you're living in a very particular context. And do you know what it is? You were living in one of the longest standing white supremacist social orders in history. This is beyond dispute. When I say white supremacists, you should not be thinking about clan hoods. You should be thinking about systems and structures that make things easy for people like me and hard for people who don't look like me. That is a fact.
Notice how it's indisputable. He does this with the Christian Marxist thing as well. It's indisputable. You can't dispute me. This is one of the things that critical theorists, of course, do. Well, now Duke Kwon and Greg Thompson, they have decided to write a book, Reparations, a Christian Call for Repentance and Repair. Our concern is not to defend the Christian church from its alleged ideological victimization, but to defend our neighbors from their actual victimization by repairing the harm done by white supremacy in their communities. Here's what Duke Kwon says. We believe the biblical case for reparations is extraordinarily clear. The Christian church has a history that makes us complicit with the evils of white supremacy and responsible to remediate those harms. We believe we have a strong moral tradition that tells us the Christian church should embrace the call to provide restitution and to love our neighbors who have been historically robbed. Christians, more than any other group in America, should be at the forefront on reparations. And Greg Thompson continues, we've intended to supplement existing conversations around reparations. Also, several Christians we know are being confused by thought leaders who suggest reparations or any talk about structural injustice is a product of non-Christian ideas or Marxism. We're trying to push against this weakening of legitimate historic moral mandates. Oh, my goodness. What is the strongest argument you know against reparations, and how would you answer them? This again, Thompson. Most of the arguments against reparations fall into three categories. One is the denier, the person who says, we're past this. Why are we still talking about this? I don't consider those substantive arguments. It's the latest in prejudicial denial. There are arguments about the complexity and application of reparations, that it feels too big and feels overwhelming. Another set of concerns comes from an important group, which sometimes includes African American leaders, who have concerns about a political economy and identity when they ask, are African Americans being victims? Are we reifying racial categories? We listen carefully to them. We've tried to account for their concerns in our argument. And Quan, some people will say, well, slave owners are dead, but we're not just talking about reparations for slavery. There's a strong Christian tradition that restitution is owed even to descendants of victims of theft who have been since deceased. Many Christians struggle with corporate responsibility. Even if I did not do something personally, I'm responsible for the repair and heal the thefts of the groups of which I am a part. This is neighbor love. If I could, this is the reporter, if I could see someone saying, if we did reparations, at what point we would stop, how do you respond to people who believe it can't practically work? There's sometimes a motive in that question that's a pretext for not taking it seriously. When are these folks going to be satisfied? I bet we could ask them. Also, when are we done with democracy? When are we done with... Notice how they don't want to answer the tough questions. They don't want to answer. They don't want to treat as legitimate the stuff that is their difficult question. And this goes back to Greg Thompson's pattern of always saying, it's indisputable. It's indisputable. I mean, he said this in the statement that it's beyond dispute. The United States is the longest standing white supremacy social order. He said this as well with the tie-in to Christians and Marxism. Where's his exact quote? It's demonstrably false binary of Christian versus Marxist. You see what he does. Now, why do I start here with the PCA, one of the more conservative denominations in the country? I start there to make this point. It is not just invading churches. It is getting a foothold in some conservative churches, let's be clear here, by well-meaning people who care and have essentially decided that the gospel itself is not enough of a solution to bring healing. They've given up on the gospel in favor of works. But it's not just happening there, it's coming to your school as well. And when it becomes that much an issue within churches, it's going to be hard to stop it from coming into your schools. This is Stanley Kurtz at National Review. The woke revolution in the classroom is about to go federal. In an early but revelatory move, President Biden's Department of Education has signaled its intent to impose the most radical forms of critical race theory on America's schools, very much including the 1619 Project and the so-called anti-racism of Ibram Kendi. Ibram's anti-racism, which advocates a massive and indefinite expansion of reverse discrimination, is more like neo-racism. Biden is obviously co-opting conservatives' interest in reviving traditional U.S. history and civics to deliver its perfect opposite, federal imposition of the very ideas conservatives aim to combat. Biden's Department of Education has just released the text of a proposed new rule establishing priorities for grants in American history and civics education programs. That rule gives priority to grant projects that incorporate racially, ethnically, culturally, and linguistically diverse perspectives. The rule goes on to cite and praise the New York Times landmark 1619 Project, as well as the work of critical race theorist Kendi, as leading examples of the sort of ideas the Biden administration wants to spread. The programs immediately targeted by Biden's new priority criteria for American history and civics grants are small. Once in place, however, those criteria will undoubtedly influence the much larger and vastly more dangerous Civic Secures Democracy Act. This bill would appropriate $1 billion a year for 6 years for history and civics education. Support for leftist action civics is already written into the priority criteria of the bill itself. I have argued that additional anodyne-sounding priorities criteria, the Civic Secures Democracy Act, criteria favoring grants targeted to undeserved populations and the mitigation of various racial, ethnic, and linguistic achievement gaps would be interpreted by the Biden administration as a green light to fund critical race theory in schools. The new draft federal rule for grant priority in American history and civics education makes it clear that this is indeed the Biden administration's intent. Their intent in pushing critical race theory on America's schools could already be gleaned from the president's repeated endorsement of the notion that America is systemically racist. Biden's statements to that effect are all actually cited in the new federal rule. It's of interest as well that the new rule explicitly endorses the wave of woke critical race theory currently sweeping through America's schools. Biden's new American history and civics rule also expresses support for cultural responsive teaching, the ultra woke and utterly politicized pedagogy derived from critical race theory already imposed on teachers in Illinois. Y'all, it's gotten so far into your churches and now it's coming into your schools. You better know what you're dealing with when it comes to critical theory. It is Marxist ideology, and they like to tell you that it's indisputable, these things, because they don't want you to be able to push back at all. You better push back.
I really do like his opinion on it.
The phone number, if you'd like to be a part of this here program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. 7425. Cornell West is now in hot water with the wokes. That's right. Cornell West. You know Cornell West. Cornell West is the progressive professor. He's a professor of the practice of public philosophy at Harvard. Jeremy Tate is the founder of the classical learning test. They are upset that Howard University intends to get rid of classics education. This is them writing in the Washington Post. Upon learning to read while enslaved, Frederick Douglass began his great journey of emancipation, as such journeys always begin, in the mind. Defying unjust laws, Douglass read in secret, empowered by the wisdom of contemporaries and classics alike, to think as a free man. Douglass risked mockery, abuse, beating, and even death to study the likes of Socrates, Cato, and Cicero. Long after Douglass's encounters with those ancient thinkers, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. would be similarly galvanized by his readings in the classics as a young seminarian. He mentioned Socrates 3 times in his 1963 letter from Birmingham jail. Yet today, one of America's greatest black institutions, Howard University, is diminishing the light of wisdom and truth that inspired Douglass, King, and countless other freedom fighters. Amid a move for educational prioritization, Howard University is dissolving its classics department. Tenured faculty will be dispersed to other departments where their courses can still be taught. But the university has sent a disturbing message by abolishing the department. Academia's continual campaign to disregard or neglect the classics is a sign of spiritual decay, moral decline, and a deep intellectual narrowness running amok in American culture. Those who commit this terrible act treat Western civilization as either irrelevant and not worthy of prioritization, or as harmful and worthy only of condemnation. Sadly, in our culture's conception, the crimes of the West have become so central that it's hard to keep track of the best of the West. We must be vigilant and draw the distinction between Western civilization philosophy on the one hand and Western crimes on the other. The crimes spring from certain philosophies and certain aspects of the civilization, not all of them. The Western canon is, more than anything, a conversation among great thinkers over generations that grows richer the more we add our own voices and the excellence of voices from Africa, Asia, Latin America, and everywhere else in the world. We should never cancel voices in this conversation, whether that voice is Homer or a student at Howard University, for this is no ordinary discussion. The Western canon is an extended dialogue among the creme de la creme of our civilization about the most fundamental questions. It is about asking what kind of creatures are we, no matter what context we find ourselves in. The left is spit mad at Cornell West, who they view as one of their own, for coming out in defense of the Western canon, something, of course, he's going to do. But the wokes don't like it. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, should you like to weigh in, the phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. The Biden administration has decided to cut nicotine in cigarettes, or at least they're trying to. They're considering requiring tobacco companies, according to the Wall Street Journal, to lower nicotine in all cigarettes sold in the United States to levels at which they are no longer addictive, according to people familiar with the matter. That reminds me, New Zealand is banning the sale of cigarettes to anyone born after 2004, trying to ban cigarettes altogether. You know, listen, I will have a cigar on occasion. Cigars are, for those of you who don't know, because my gosh, do I get lectured by people. Cigars are different from cigarettes. One, they're not addictive. They don't have nicotine in them. And two, you don't actually inhale the smoke into your lungs like you do with a cigar or with a cigarette. You'll wind up puking your guts up if you do. A cigarette, though, the smoke is inhaled into your lungs. You can get lung cancer. You've got other health problems along the way. You can certainly get mouth cancer, throat cancer from cigars. That's true. But cigarettes are the ones that you get addicted to. And they are produced in ways to make you addictive to them, including inclusion of nicotine. And they very much, the Biden administration wants to reduce the nicotine, get rid of it in cigarettes, I guess. So you get over there, also looking at a rule to scrap menthol cigarettes. Part of this is because they impose the rules on vaping, and in so doing, a lot of people who were vaping went back to cigarettes. The law of unintended consequences. Scott Gottlieb, an FDA commissioner under the Trump administration, pursued both a menthol ban and a reduction of nicotine in cigarettes as part of a broader tobacco policy he proposed in 2017, but he left the agency in 2019 and plans were shelved. New Zealand has decided to ban smoking. Nicotine itself doesn't cause cancer, heart disease, or lung disease, according to the FDA, but it hooks people on cigarettes, which are linked to 480,000 deaths in the U.S. each year. Marlboro maker Altria Group shares fell more than 6% Monday afternoon on the news. Man, I own stock in that company. Any action that the FDA takes must be based on science and evidence and must consider the real-world consequences of such actions, including the growth of an illicit market and the impact on hundreds of thousands of jobs from the farm to local stores across the country, an Altria spokesman said. Now, of course, this coming towards a push towards marijuana. Today is 420. I don't bring this up because this is the day people like smoke weed all day in Piedmont Park in Atlanta and Central Park in New York and the like. But you know, one of the things that's happening is for years, marijuana advocates have said marijuana is not addictive and have used it. Now, never mind that it's, my goodness, the number of people, I cannot remember, and this is not an exaggeration, I cannot remember the last time I was in my car where I did not smell someone smoking marijuana. I was driving home from, where did we go? I guess we'd gone to Atlanta somewhere. No, we'd gone up to Stockbridge. My son had a soccer game in Stockbridge. And we were coming home, and it's about a 45-minute ride down I-75. It's south of Atlanta. We're headed south to Macon, and I wound up calling 911 in Monroe County. There was an 18-wheeler that was doing probably 80 miles an hour, ran two people off the road, and you could just see the clouds of marijuana. Dude was just stoned driving his 18-wheeler. I mean, you could see the smoke, you could smell the marijuana. He was going 80 miles an hour. Multiple people he ran off the road. I wound up calling 911. The guy made it through Monroe County. They never stopped him. I assume, I would like to think that the Department of Public Safety actually pulled up close to him and was able to read the DOT door number on his door, and then he ran me off the road, or I shouldn't say completely ran me off the road. I had to swerve into the emergency lane because he got over really abruptly. And but dude was smoking marijuana. I can't remember the last time I've been on the road where I haven't smelled people smoking marijuana. It's becoming more and more common. And you could other the herby leafy stuff that looks like oregano is the more common stuff, and it's the one that stinks, and it's typically non-addictive. At least that's what marijuana advocates have said. But there's a problem there as well, as people, a lot of younger people are shifting to marijuana, and it's purported as some sort of healthy panacea for aches and pains and the rise of CBD and the like, and some of it is psychosomatic. Not all of it has science behind it. It's kind of like essential oils. They advertise it for everything from curing cancer to helping you sleep well. They do the same thing with CBD, it seems, and now with THC and marijuana. A lot of younger people are moving there, and there's becoming a problem there. There's the chronic vomit syndrome of people who ingest so much they begin to vomit nonstop, sometimes for a day, but also the manufacturers for if you're smoking marijuana are weaving things into the wrappers for joints and the like, just like with cigarettes, that make them addictive. And because marijuana is less regulated, it is harder to stamp out, and we're going to see a rise in addiction there as well. And by the way, if you're actually smoking a joint, you're burning and getting carcinogen into your lungs, and you're going to get cancer, even though there's mass denial of this. There's mass denial of addiction, but you can see the trend lines, and the trend lines are obvious. You're banning cigarettes now. You've cracked down on vaping. The people left cigarettes and went to vaping. Now you've cracked down on vaping, so they've gone back to cigarettes for the nicotine level. Now you're going to crack down on cigarettes, and they're going to go wholesale into marijuana, and that's going to create a new class of addictiveness. Unless they switch to, I guess, they'll make the edibles and the other things that people use addictive in some capacity at some point to keep people there. And, Altria and these other companies, they're starting to move into that market as well. They want to build a consumer base there. And every time the government decides to quibble with this stuff, as opposed to just outright banning it, and that's the funny thing here, if they just went on and they said it's bad, we're going to ban it, do it. Instead, they like the tax revenue. They don't like the health costs. They don't like the negative effects on health. They don't like the negative effects on healthcare. They don't like the negative costs in society, but they don't want to ban it. At least in New Zealand, they're saying, you know what, screw this, we're going to ban it. That no more nicotine no more cigarettes if you're born in 2004. Here in this country, we're not. One, there's a farmer constituent interest growing tobacco. It's a legitimate interest. But two, they actually, so many states prop up healthcare systems and the like on the taxation from cigarettes. So they can't really get rid of it. The FDA concluded in 2013 menthols are harder to quit and likely pose a greater health risk than regular cigarettes. The agency said use of the cigarettes was likely associated with increased smoking initiation by youth and young adults. Menthol, a compound that occurs naturally in mint plants, has been added to cigarettes since the 1920s. It provides a cooling sensation in the mouth and throat, similar to that of a mentholated cough drop. Health officials have said that eases the throat irritation caused by cigarette smoke, making menthols more appealing to young people and those who have never smoked. The tobacco industry has rejected the FDA's findings on menthol. Menthols represent about a third of the 226 billion cigarettes sold annually in the country and are popular among teenage and African-American smokers. And maybe they'll go back to Juuls and the vaping for a while. I got asked if I want to do some sort of vaping advertisement. I was like, hell no, I don't want to advertise that stuff. I'm amazed at the people who do. Cigarettes do cause cancer, and they are habit forming, and nicotine is a habit. And you can have a cigar. This is all the kids should go for cigars, but if they did, I'm sure some company would come out and make addictive cigars. And then what would we do? If it's that big of a concern, though, ban it. Just ban it. They're not going to, though, because they need the tax revenue. As much as people are addicted to cigarettes, the government is addicted to the revenue from cigarettes. And it's also why marijuana legalization in this country is going to come way more quickly at this point than people realize. There was a poll out the other day that only like 16% of Americans oppose marijuana legalization at this point. It's only a matter of time before it happens because it'll be a new source of revenue for the government. Who cares about the side effects? Who cares about the regulation? Who cares about whether they're making wrappers for joints addictive so that you develop an addiction to marijuana, whether you think marijuana is addictive or not? It's all coming, and it's all coming with government sanction because they want the tax revenue. And 30 years from now, we'll be having conversations about kids getting lung cancer from smoking too many joints. We'll do it all over again. By then, maybe we'll move on to legalization of crack or something like that. As long as the government can get more revenue, they'll be fine. The whole part of it, that's what frustrates me about all of this is you come out and you say, well, we've got to destroy this industry because it causes health problems, but we can't destroy it because we need the revenue, but we can't really say that. We can't be honest about it. It goes back to the masks and the vaccine. Just be honest with us about the virus. Be honest with us about wearing masks. Be honest with us with the vaccine instead of dancing around this. Well, you need the vaccine, but then you need to stay home. Our government cannot be honest about its public policies.
You're listening to the Erick Erickson.
Hello and welcome back. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. We're in a bubble. Can we acknowledge we're in a bubble? A bubble that probably is strengthened and made safe from bursting for a while longer by the massive influx of federal government cash into the economy. But we're in a bubble. Y'all seen housing prices? So I live in the middle of Georgia. There is a housing boom at this point because there isn't enough housing for people who want houses. People are having a hard time. I now know 3 separate couples who sold their houses hoping to get into other houses and then sold their houses more quickly than they could secure the new houses and have even had trouble finding apartments to move into while they try to move their stuff out of the house they sold to get into the house they want. Many of them can't. None of these three can. Other people are in the same situation, and people are having a hard time building houses now because supplies are scarce. Plywood has gone through the roof. People are having to scale back some house construction projects because the price of lumber has gotten out of control. Inflation is everywhere you look, and yet the government denies that there's any inflation at all. Car lots are almost empty. A couple of car lots near me have started spacing out the cars more to make the car lots look full. One of them hasn't, and the car lot's virtually empty. People have used their stimulus checks to buy cars, or they can't get cars in. Prices are going up on that as well. Chip manufacturing, there's a shortage there. One of the downsides now doing these two radio shows is I'm going to miss out. Apple is going to have its big launch event this afternoon. I gotta figure out time to watch it, see what they're doing. I may have to watch it while I'm also on radio this afternoon. They'll never know. But Apple's one of the few companies not in a chip shortage. It's not in a chip shortage because it kind of took in-house its manufacturing to meet its needs. But other chip manufacturers are having all sorts of problems. Prices, as a result, are going up. The stock market is getting more and more irrational. People are using it as a casino with their stimulus checks. Stonks, not stocks, GameStop and the like, driving things up, having populist revolutions of the stock market. And then you've got the Warren Buffett metric of the value of the stock market. If it exceeds GDP, you're in bad trouble. It's like 200% of GDP. And now you've got these new stock analysts out there saying, well, you know, Buffett had his day, but with the new kids on the block and technology's changing. No, it's not, you people. I have a hard time trusting anyone who tells me that this rule that has always been a good indicator somehow is not. When you hear people tell you that a rule that has always worked now doesn't work because things, you know you got a problem. We're in a bubble. New is old again and old is new again. And this bubble is manifesting itself in all sorts of ways that also involve different levels of greed from billionaires around the world. And part of this bubble is translated into what's happening in Europe with a topic some of you will not care about. And until I had a kid in soccer, I would have never cared about. But European teams are breaking away from their countries and their internal national soccer clubs to form some super league. And people are livid. After months of secret talks, the breakaway teams, a dozen of the world's richest and most storied soccer clubs, announced they'd formed a breakaway European club competition that would, if it comes to fruition, upend the structures, economics, and relationships that have bound global soccer for nearly a century. Real Madrid and Barcelona in Spain, Manchester United and Liverpool in England, Juventus and AC Milan in Italy confirmed their plans late Sunday. They said they plan to add at least 3 more founding members, hold midweek matches that would put the league in direct competition with the existing Champions League and begin play as soon as practical. We will help football at every level and take it to the rightful place in the world, says Real Madrid's president, Florentino Perez, who was named the first chairman of what the clubs are calling the Super League. Essentially, it's going to be like the NFL or the NBA. Soccer's current model supplements domestic leagues. So you've got an English league for English teams. You got a Spanish league for Spanish clubs. You got continental competitions between the best clubs. The most prestigious is the Champions League. It brings together the best teams from the domestic leagues. They play in Europe. The winner there arguably is the best soccer club in the world. And what this will now do is make it very close. We'll have 12 teams, and they'll be like the NBA. They'll play each other. They'll have a Super Bowl, or they'll have a championship at the end, and the winner will be declared the best. And the current system funnels millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of television and sponsorship revenue to the world's richest clubs, but then they supplement their domestic revenue with payouts from the Champions League. All the money trickles down, and it props up the whole system. If you should watch Ted Lasso. You should watch Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso is the best television show you're probably not watching. It is the best television show on TV this past year. Language warning. The concept of the show is based on a commercial, which sounds lame, and the show is genius. It is, I have not had a single person watch that show and not like it. Jason Sudeikis is the actor. He plays Ted Lasso. He is an American collegiate football coach. He is hired by a Premier League team. The Premier League is the big soccer league in the UK and in England. And teams can fall out of and get into the Premier League. They're relegated, and then they can rise back up into the Premier League if they get good again. And he is hired by one of the Premier League teams to become its coach of English football, which is not American football. This gives away nothing because you find it out in the first episode. The reason that Ted Lasso is hired to be the coach of the English football team is because the league owner went through a very nasty divorce with her husband. The only thing the husband loves in life is the team, and she decides to hire Ted Lasso and burn it to the ground. He, of course, is not in on the plan. And it is a genius television show. It is a feel-good show. And it gives you, I am no expert on soccer. I only know about the Premier League because I grew up in Dubai, rooting for Manchester United, and then actually watch Ted Lasso and know more about the Premier League. Well, the head of soccer, the head of English football, is a guy you may have heard of, William Windsor, the future King of England, the Duke of Cambridge. And he is out to stop this. The Prime Minister in Great Britain is out to stop this. The President of France is out to stop this. The King of Spain is out to stop this. The Chancellor of Germany is out to stop it. The President and the Prime Minister of Italy is out to stop it. They all want to stop it. Now, what is actually doing here? Let me give you the names here. The 12 teams signed up as founders are United, Liverpool, Manchester City, Arsenal, Chelsea, and Tottenham in the Premier League in England. You'll have Atletico Madrid, AC Milan. You'll have a few others. And here's the thing they all have in common. They have billionaire owners. And the billionaire owners decided they wanted to make more money. In fact, several of these teams, including Liverpool and England, came out and said that the managers and the coach, that they had no idea. They were not consulted. The players were not consulted. It was the owners themselves, the billionaires, who decided to do this because they want to make more money for their teams. Y'all, we're in a bubble. And this is now spilling out into European soccer, a subject none of us should really have to care about in this country, although there are an increasing number of soccer fans in this country, including my son. But this is all part of the bubble. Billionaires now are trying to maximize their revenue as they're getting a sense that something is up, and they're trying to hoard their cash and pool it in ways that they can control better than they can right now, because something bad in the economy is coming, and nobody wants to talk about it. And the Federal Reserve is telling us there is no inflation when the price to build a home in this country is skyrocketing because lumber prices have gone up. It seems like everyone is in mass denial about what's happening, and the soccer teams seem to know what's happening, and the countries that they're in are furious about it. They deserve to be. But we're in a bubble. Save your money, folks. Save your money. Guys, put them somewhere where it's safe. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show. The phone number, 877-97-ERIC. 877-973-7425. Glad to have you with me today. I want to revisit a couple of topics. I wasn't going to do this, but actually, in looking at what I want to talk about, I think it fits and I want to. In the first hour, I talked about poor old Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins is one of the most famous atheists on the planet. Richard Dawkins, along with, Sam Harris, and who all is in this group? They call them the Four Horsemen of atheism. What was it? Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, and is it Daniel? New Atheism. Yeah. Christopher Hitchens and Daniel Dennett. Chris Hitchens, whose brother, by the way, is a minister, is a theologian. The new atheists. Richard Dawkins is an evolutionary biologist. He has written a number of very famous books that caught the imagination of a number of people and either led them out of the faith or kept them from embracing faith that everything we do, it's all evolutionary biology. Even our idea, our mind creating a God is somehow to benefit us, that through that belief, we sometimes get psychosomatic relief from things, but it's all not real. God's not real. When we get back into the grave, the worms eat our body, the end. And in 1996, the American Humanist Association gave Richard Dawkins the AHA Humanist of the Year Award for communication of scientific concepts to the public to the advancement of the cause of humanism. The American Humanist Society has now decided that the evolutionary biologist can no longer keep the award because he has made statements that use the guise of scientific discourse to demean marginalized groups. His latest statement implies the identities of transgender individuals are fraudulent, while also simultaneously attacking black identity as one that can be assumed when convenient. His crime was to actually tweet that men who believe they are women is no different than Rachel Dolezal believing she was black. That was his crime. For uttering this heresy that transgenderism is a identification issue and a mental issue and not a real biological issue, the evolutionary biologist must have his award from 1996 taken back because he's dared to criticize the transgender movement. Atheism is a religion. It has its own orthodoxies. It has its own liturgies. It has its own sacraments, and it has its own heresies. Now, on the far other end of the woke side of things, in the theological woke category, we have Duke Kwan and Greg Thompson at Grace DC. It's a church with the Presbyterian Church in America, the PCA, a conservative evangelical denomination that believes in the inerrant word of the Bible, does not have female pastors, treats very seriously the word of God, probably could spend a little more time with the Westminster Confession, but nonetheless, I am a member of the PCA, and Greg Thompson is one of the foremost proponents in evangelical Christendom of critical race theory, and has said it is indisputable that Christians and Marxists have ties, and that it is beyond dispute that the United States is the longest existing white supremacist society on the planet. It's beyond dispute, he says, that we need reparations now. Joined by Duke Kwan, who believes we must eliminate a white society that is supremely racist in some sense. It's got systemic racism woven into it, and the only way to get rid of it is to stamp it out by doing reparations. Anyone who says otherwise is just in denial or racist or it's just bad. You can't deny it. It's beyond dispute. This is what Greg Thompson does whenever he encounters a point he doesn't want to have to debate. He just says it's beyond dispute. It's beyond dispute. We need racial reparations in this country. Now, these are opposite ends of the woke spectrum, from the atheist woke to the theological woke. And they have a common tie. The common tie is they refuse to be challenged. They refuse to debate. They cannot stand in good faith in the town square to debate. Instead, they must vilify those who question them. With Greg Thompson, the theologian, it's beyond dispute that we're a white supremacist nation. It is beyond dispute that Christians and Marxists have a lot in common. And now he says of the arguments against reparations that when a person says we're past this, why are we still talking about this? I don't consider it substantive argument. It's the latest in prejudicial denial. The only good faith arguments he finds are the ones in support of reparations. It is a 21st century indulgence designed by woke theologians to give them a pass on just preaching the gospel and letting the Holy Spirit do its work. Instead, it's a works-based salvation. We must do reparations, not let the Holy Spirit work. It is a common thread that neither of these sides, the woke theologian and the woke atheist who believes in transgenderism, that they can't debate it. You got to be silenced. It's beyond dispute you're a racist if you think one thing. It is beyond dispute that you're transphobe if you believe something. We can't debate it. You must be shut up. In order to have acceptance, you must be silenced. Which gets me now to the latest. Guess who's back? Yes, my friends. It's been a while. It has been. She's been out there somewhere, sailing the ocean blue. And now a topic we haven't spent a lot of time on. We have to get back to it. What is that topic? Well, if the sound would play, oh my gosh, the computer messed it all up. There we go.
It sure is hot outside.
Hey, where did all the snow go?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It's getting warmer. It's getting warmer. Every year the summer's warmer. What am I to do? I go outside and play a game, but it's too hot for that too.
This is an actual song. You know, like, I've been thinking I need to find my own Paul Shanklin, but with this, the global warming, I don't have to. This is an actual leftist hippy-dippy song about global warming they came up with, and it's dreadful. And it's the perfect segue to Greta Thunberg is back. That's not funny.
Just with the climate crisis, those who are the most vulnerable need to be prioritized, and global problems require global solutions. It is completely unethical that high-income countries are now vaccinating young and healthy people if that happens at the expense of people in risk groups and on the front lines in low and middle-income countries. And this is a moral test. We talk today about showing solidarity, and yet vaccine nationalism, it's what's running the vaccine distribution.
Vaccine nationalism is the latest problem. How dare you in your country get the vaccine when the poor people in Africa who can't get air conditioning because of Greta Thunberg and have to have mosquito nets because of Bill Gates can't get the vaccine so they can stay alive long enough to die of malaria? How dare you? This is where we are. The wokes have trotted Greta Thunberg back. Now, where has Greta Thunberg been? On a boat, sailing the world for the BBC to film a documentary on global warming. She's no longer living at home. She's living in a safe house, she says. And the media has brought her back. You know, her superhero power is that she's got autism, and so she is very blunt, and she doesn't use diplomatic language. This is her spin. This is also the media spin. You're not allowed to question Greta Thunberg, a 60-year-old, on what does she know. Her family, friends, and acolytes fed her a line of BS that the whole world is going to come to an end within the next decade, and we must do something or else we're all going to die. Don't adapt. Don't try to adapt. No, No, that is not the Thunberg way, but just me talking about her gets me potentially canceled because you're not allowed to question Greta Thunberg, a young lady with autism, or at least she's on the spectrum. But because of that, you're not allowed to question anything about her.
And ahoy, Greta! Teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg arrives in New York today with her campaign to save the planet. Go, Greta, go!
Sorry, my brain is not working correctly.
I am so smitten with this little girl that keep reminding myself she's only 16.
Let's not wait any longer. Let's do it now. Yes.
Teenage activist Greta Thunberg. She's elevated the issue, I'd say, more than most.
Some are calling it the Greta Thunberg effect.
You could call it the Greta effect.
I mean, of course, I wished this was more not focused on me, but more as a whole.
She's amazing. Yeah. And so committed at such a young age.
At just 16 years old, it's incredible.
And when I became maybe 11, I became depressed. And the climate crisis was a huge cause of that.
We have activists like Greta Thunberg. The youngest person on the list, 16-year-old Greta Thunberg.
Like 16-year-old Greta Thunberg.
And of course, different countries have different, different ways.
And I love this little girl. She's so unapologetic and poised. I saw her speak in Stockholm, and she had the whole room mesmerized before she even opened her mouth.
And that's why, I get it.
Thunberg became the unlikely leader of a global youth movement who call her the voice of the planet.
The voice of the... You're not allowed to question Greta Thunberg. You're not allowed to question her. You're not allowed to because she's on the spectrum. We got to listen to her. You're not allowed to question. All of this, the wokes, this is what they do now. You're not allowed to question them. If you question them, you hate children who have special needs. You hate transgender people. You hate black people. You hate anything they don't want. You're not allowed to question the wokes at all. It is theological. It is sacramental. It is left-wing orthodoxy. It is wokeism. And Woko Haram will persecute you if you dare question anything that the wokes decide is tried and true. It is beyond dispute, they say, which typically means it's not.
You can follow Erick around social media.
Welcome back. It is Erick Erickson here. Let's go to the phones. John in Rutledge, you are going to be next. Welcome to the show.
Boy, I am really enjoying your show.
Thank you.
You knock me out. I love that commercial music. I can't quit laughing. I've got something. It's an absolute miracle that the NAACP hadn't got a hold of this. There's an insurance company. I don't know if you'll let me say the name. That's not important. But when I tell you what it's about, everybody has probably seen this on TV. But the first thing they show is a black guy with half a body sitting on top of a motorcycle riding around. I call this insurance company. Now, it's not just a black guy. There's, black and white guys, but the first main character is a black guy.
Uh-huh.
He has no legs. He's got half a body sitting up on top of a motorcycle riding around.
Yeah, so now let me set the stage here for people, John. This is a Progressive insurance commercial, and it's called, instead of Centaur, it's called Motar, and the black man, half his body is a motorcycle. So you get his torso and his arms and his head, and then the rest of his body's a motorcycle.
Right. That is so depressing, not because it's a black guy. I have so many friends I was in Vietnam with, and luckily I came back. I was a helicopter mechanic, so I stayed out of harm's way pretty good bit. But I've got so many friends that we rode motorcycles before we went, and there's a couple of them that can't ride. They don't have a leg or arm or whatever. But it's so depressing for them to run an ad like that with guys with half a body on a motorcycle. It's so disgusting.
And yeah, this is the Progressive Insurance Company, which itself is fairly progressive. I've got this ad queued up right here. Let's listen to this together. You see our herd of motorcycles. In fact, the ad call is Motar Herd, and it's a bunch of people welded into their motorcycles.
It's amazing to see him in the wild like this.
For those who were born to ride, there's Progressive.
And then it's got the Motar guy who pops a wheelie as he's staring at the crowd below. In a world where the ableist and the disabled are apparently supposed to fight each other, I'm surprised that they haven't gone after Progressive for this as well. And I mean, what about the guys who, John, they're not actually like part man, part motorcycle, but they identify as a motorcycle?
Yeah.
Why are they not represented in this commercial? I mean,
it's unreal.
They're clearly being insensitive about all of it. Yeah, listen, I mean, and I don't see a Harley there. My wife would be pretty offended by that.
We do a lot of fundraising, if people hasn't noticed, and there's a commercial on TV, Bikers for Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of bikers have gotten together, and they see what's going on, and they don't like it worth a darn. And so we got Bikers for Trump now. So all you Trump haters, you better watch it.
Well, so let me ask you this. They had the big, the Memorial Day ride up in D.C. for years and years, and just had tens and then hundreds of thousands of motorcycles show up. And I guess President Trump was the last president that they did that with. And then they decided it got too unwieldy, and they stopped doing it. I wonder if they're going to do this again in a re-up to 2024 if the president comes back.
I hope so. But out here in Rutledge, we have a state park, Hard Labor Creek.
Oh, yeah.
State Park. And we're doing a ride there. And there'll probably be, anywhere from 800 to 1,000, maybe more.
Wow.
Motorcycles going to the park. We used to go to Madison, Georgia, but with the virus going around, they decided to hold it at Hard Labor Creek State Park here in Rutledge.
I think my wife has mentioned that one.
Come out if they'd like to see, and hopefully we'll see some Bikers for Trump down there.
I bet you will. Listen, John, let me let you go there. I appreciate the call very much. It wouldn't surprise me if you did. By the way, the president was on TV last night, Trump, not Biden. I got the audio. We'll get to that when we come back. But first, let's go to Scott in Augusta. Scott, welcome.
Hey, Eric, how you doing?
Good. How about yourself?
Hey, fine. I had a question. This might be off topic, but going back to the governor's emergency orders that were rescinded, a couple of weeks ago, that affected the voting. The voting stuff with, in particular, the things that were implemented in that emergency action, like the drop boxes and anything voter related.
Yeah.
In that emergency action, was that something that the governor administration came up with these details, or did they adopt some uniform code?
Oh, that's a good question.
Out there with other states.
Yeah.
Where did all this?
So what the governor's order said was to, given the state of emergency, that the state should comply with directives from the Trump administration, from the CDC, from the Department of Homeland Security, et cetera. The Trump administration, Department of Homeland Security, put out guidelines for voting during the pandemic. And one of those guidelines was spaced out lines, extended absentee ballots, and drop boxes. It was all, believe it or not, it was actually the Trump administration that issued the guidance. And after the election, the president then fired the guy who had put out the guidance. But the drop boxes and the spread out lines and the expanded absentee ballots, those all came actually from the Department of Homeland Security and the Trump administration. And all the governor's order did was say comply with the guidance from the Trump administration. So the Secretary of State complied with guidance from the Trump administration to put the drop boxes out. And guess what? They all go away now, except the state of Georgia just made them legal, which I don't think they should have. Well, it's not just Greta Thunberg who is back. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. The former president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, has returned to the scene, giving an interview to Sean Hannity on Fox News last night.
What are the odds? If I were to
First
ask,
of all, it's a long time. The odds. What are the odds? Look,
the odds.
I got tremendous numbers. Nobody's ever gotten the numbers I got. No sitting presidents come even close. There's more popularity now than there was the day before the election because they see how bad things are at the border. They see what's going on. They see that their guns are going to be gone. Their Second Amendment, their taxes are going up. Regulations are going through the roof. Jobs are going to go out. What do you see? You know, this is going to take a little while to show. But if they add all these regulations back, the jobs are going to be gone. Your energy independence is going to be gone. So I say this. I am looking at it very seriously. Beyond seriously.
Looking at it very seriously, coming back beyond seriously. And then there's this.
All of these things are good. These are popular things, but more important than popular, they're great things for this country. They're going to rip apart your Second Amendment. They're doing things to this country that Bernie Sanders would have said impossible. And I don't know if Joe knows what's going on with it because I think you have a cabal. You have a group of people that are sitting around a table just saying, do this, do this, do this. They're giving them these things to sign. It's hard to believe. Now, we're going to take back the House in 22. We have a real chance.
We are going to take back the House in 2022. The question is he actually going to run in 2024? I realize it is April 20th. Yeah, the jokes write themselves, I realize, but it's 4/20/2021. We are a ways away from the 2024 presidential race. And right now, it looks like a lot of Republicans are trying to build up Ron DeSantis as a challenger to Kamala Harris. Because let's be real honest, that you're not going to see a lot of Republican donors behind the scenes push Donald Trump to run in 2024. That they rapidly are arriving at the conclusion he's not going to run, in part because of the age he will be at that time, in part because of conversations they're having behind the scenes, and so they're not sure. But he can't really say that until after 2022. Because he wants his clout for 2022. He wants his clout for 2022. And he's going to need it. Because he wants to battle Brian Kemp in Georgia. He wants to battle Liz Cheney in Wyoming. He's got a number of other people he wants to battle. And he wants to build strong. Now, in Georgia, the Republicans there have a problem because the Trump base is pushing very hard for the ouster of a number of Republicans. They will get their way definitely with Jeff Duncan, the lieutenant governor. They may get their way with Brad Raffensperger. My mind went blank for a minute. The Secretary of State. They may see him not run. Jody Heiss, my friend, the congressman, is running for Secretary of State in Georgia. He's going to be facing redistricting anyway, although he could hold on to his district, but he's ready to come back home, I think. He'll be Secretary of State. He'd be a good Secretary of State if Raffensperger doesn't run. If Raffensperger wins, he will require Democrats to cross over in a primary and vote for him, which they may do, because Stacey Abrams will probably run unopposed. But now there's a problem. So the Democrats in Georgia had a guy named Charlie Bailey. He ran for Attorney General against the current Georgia Attorney General, Chris Carr. And Charlie Bailey was going to run again. He's been building up formidable war chest, but now Jen Jordan is running. Jen Jordan is Georgia's abortion Barbie. Jen Jordan is the woman who led the fight against the fetal heartbeat ban, abortion ban, and she was turned into a national hero by the media and has believed her own press. And so Jen Jordan has decided to run for Attorney General. the Democrats wanted a consolidated field. They wanted Stacey Abrams to run. I'm not sure who they were going to decide on for lieutenant governor, but then they wanted Charlie Bailey to run for attorney general. They did not want to have a crowded primary. Now, ironically, that would allow Democrats to cross over and help Brad Raffensperger keep his job, and then possibly let the Democrats take it in November. But if they have a crowded field, then the Democrats are going to have to stay home. See, this is all part of the strategy. You all need to understand this. If you live in Georgia, you need to understand what the Democrat plan is. Jen Jordan is disrupting the Democrat plan. The Democrats wanted minimal primary fights. Stacey Abrams will be their gubernatorial nominee. They wanted Charlie Bailey to be their attorney general. They got somebody already running for lieutenant governor and secretary of state. I forget who they are. But they did not want a crowded field because they wanted Democrats to be able to go over and help Brad Raffensperger in the primary and get him the nomination, knowing that if they did that, a lot of Republicans may say, well, we're not going to vote for him. Let the Democrats have this one. And they would be able to pick up a statewide seat. But Jen Jordan now from Buckhead in North Atlanta, she's in the state legislature in Georgia. The Republicans are redrawing the district. She knows her district is going to probably be one of the ones that's toast and goes back to the Republicans. So now she's going to run for attorney general, and it disrupts the Democrats' plans to get Democrats into the Republican primary. See, one of the things the Democrats are doing, and this is very smart and forward thinking if we're honest about it, is they're trying to minimize contested primaries to allow their base to move into the Republican Party, prop up the non-Trump candidates like Raffensperger, so that when you get to the November election, if it's Raffensperger versus the Democrat, you may have a lot of Republicans say, nah, I don't like him. I'm going to let the Democrats have this one. That's their hope. And if they have a bunch of contested primaries on the Democratic side, then the Democrats aren't going to be able to go over into the Republican primary and try to control that one. Listen, you got to give them some measure of commendation for their forward thinking on how to advance. You got to give them some commendation on actually playing a chess game in politics right now when a lot of people are playing checkers. It's actually pretty smart. Minimize primaries so people can jump over to the other side and prop up the guys their base doesn't like. Well, the Republican base is loaded for bear now against Jeff Duncan in Georgia and Brad Raffensperger, maybe Brian Kemp, although Kemp seems like he may be able to hold on. And there are a lot of Trump supporters saying if it's Kemp, we're not going to go vote. Stacey Abrams can have it. And there are a lot of Republican voters who like Kemp who are now basically saying, well, you know what? We were here long before you were. We'll be here after you, and we were winning without you. Now, that may not be the attitude that they should take, but you're getting to that point with these groups within the Republican Party, and it's not just Georgia, it's across the country now, where Trump supporters who, if we're honest, a lot of them are people who were not involved in Republican politics until Donald Trump came onto the scene. And now that they're in the Republican Party, they want a seat at the table, and there are a lot of people who have resented them and don't want to give them a seat at the table, but also there is this strain of my way or the highway. You're either going to give me Trump and all the people Trump likes, or I'm not going to help you. And a lot of people who laid the groundwork for the rise of the Republican Party in the South, for example, are like, we were here before you. We will be here after you. And if you don't want to be a team player, goodbye. That rubs both sides the wrong way. Somebody reached out to me on Instagram this morning and said, I can't believe you're talking about that. But the whole premise of these stories is that the Trump supporters are saying my way or the highway. It's only natural that the people who were in the Republican Party before Trump say, no, our way or the highway. And that allows Stacey Abrams and the others to rise. The problem for the GOP is they got to figure out a way to get on the same page. If you get a Brian Kemp, but then you get a Trump acolyte for lieutenant governor and the like, what happens? Will you be able to bridge that? Will you find some harmony? I suspect you will, because the specter of Stacey Abrams rising in Georgia is too much for Republicans nationally, let alone in Georgia. You got Kelly Loeffler out there right now running ads around the TP where the Braves play, blaming Stacey Abrams and Joe Biden and Raphael Warnock for losing the All-Star game. Good. The more the merrier. They need to highlight that fact. We're going to be in for probably a while longer of really nasty politics in this country. And I still think the GOP can win. The Democrats are doing their damnedest to unite every Republican in this country across the spectrum of Republicanism with their woke agenda. with their culture war agenda, with their anti-business agenda, with their propping up big business against small business agenda. You know, the Biden administration is now announcing they want massive tax increases. It's very funny. So you've got the New England Democrats, New York and up. They are New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York. They want to fully bring back the SALT deduction, that is the deduction for state and local taxes in the federal government. At the same time, they want to raise the income tax on rich Americans. Well, what they define as rich Americans. The problem with saying, if we're really honest, the problem with saying someone who makes $400,000 a year is rich is that in most of the country, that is true. But in a lot of urban areas of the country, that is not true. The cost of living is so high. $400,000 a year in San Francisco is not a lot of money. Nancy Pelosi is perfectly happy to raise federal taxes on that person and then give them 100% deduction on the SALT deduction to save them some money. Same in New York City. If you live on $400,000 a year in New York City, you are not living in Manhattan. You are living out in one of the outer boroughs and you're commuting in because $400,000 in New York City is not a ton of money. $400,000 where I live in Macon, Georgia is a heck of a lot of money. In New York City, in downtown Chicago, in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, it's not really a lot of money. It seems like it to those of us who don't live there because we don't appreciate the cost of living in those places. The Democrats want to raise taxes on businesses and they want to raise taxes on those individuals while also giving them the SALT deduction. And I just don't know that that's going to work. The Republicans don't want to raise taxes on them, but also don't want them to have the SALT deduction back. The Democrats will attack the Republicans for not wanting to raise taxes. The Republicans will attack the Democrats for wanting to give them a massive tax break. And that's kind of a non-starter on both sides. The Democrats, it looks like, and some Republicans are agreeing to raise the corporate tax to 25%, but no higher. But all of this goes back to my prior point. We're in a bubble. We're in an economic bubble. The prices of lumber are crazy. I saw a friend of mine put a Instagram picture up the other day. It was a guy with a flatbed pickup truck, and he had two big sheets of plywood. And the caption was, yeah, you got two sheets. We know you're rich. And really, lumber is a lot these days. Prices at the grocery store are going up. Prices of electronics are going up. And the Federal Reserve says, no inflation where we can see, no inflation anywhere, and yet there is. People are making irrational spending decisions, and people are making irrational purchase decisions. People are making irrational stock buying and investment decisions. You got the soccer leagues in Europe trying to consolidate to save money because they feel like they're losing money. You got billionaires out there angling to try to squeeze every penny out of everything. And now you got the federal government angling over a massive infrastructure package, more money into the economy, which is going to spark more inflation. Everybody's denying it. Nobody can believe their lying eyes at this point. There's something in the currents right now. And by the way, all of this goes back to Donald Trump. It's a perfect, see, I told you so moment. Biden went woke, as Trump said he would do. Crime waves got out of control, as Trump said would happen. Inflation went up, as Trump said would happen. The economy got wrecked, as Trump said would happen. He can run in 2024 as a see, I told you so moment. He can make his entire 2024 campaign be, I told you this would happen. And it would be a powerful message. And it would be a message he could stay on the entire time and not get sidetracked by. There are a lot of Republicans freaked out about that because a lot of Republicans want to move forward in the direction that Trump went, but without Trump, because they think ultimately he's a killer for the GOP. He would hurt the GOP. They're flirting with, they're loving Ron DeSantis. They really hope it could be DeSantis. You've got a bunch of them privately behind the scenes trying to figure out how to stop others from running against DeSantis and consolidate the Republican field around DeSantis. One of the interesting things, there's one, they're not going to be able to stop everyone, but two, the donors are beginning to weigh in behind the scenes. I still think one of the most notable things is with the rise of DeSantis right now, in anticipation of his 2022 re-election in Florida, you do not have a Republican smear campaign against it. You've already had the smear campaign against Josh Hawley from the right. You've had the one against Nikki Haley from the right. The one against Ted Cruz from the right. Who else is a potential? Basically, any Republican other than DeSantis right now, people on the right have already started whisper campaigns against. Ron DeSantis is the only one who seems to unite people across the board, left, right, and center within the GOP, Trump and non-Trump within the GOP. The only question remaining is, does Donald Trump have a go of it in 2024? Because no one's going to stand in his way if he does.
He doesn't just have a radio show. Eric has Get exclusive interviews and Eric's daily email by texting show to 33777.
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson. The phone. Well, it's kind of too late, isn't it? All right. Let me tell you about Eden Pure, because this is the time of year where you need Eden Pure. It is a air purifier. It's portable. You can hold it in your hand. The Eden Pure Thunderstorm. Now, they've got bigger ones, but the Thunderstorm is such a great invention because it's filterless. You don't have to keep changing filters. Like my big R2D2 size one in the backyard has these massive filters you got to change once a year, and they're expensive in and of themselves. You don't have to worry about with the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. You hold it in your hand, you can put it in your car, you can put it in your room, you can put it in the kitchen. It doesn't just get rid of the pollen and the bacteria and the mold in the air, it gets rid of odors as well. It's so good. Right now, if you go to EdenPureDeals.com, they'll give you $10 off the lowest sales price. You got to use the code word Erick, E-R-I-C-K. Erick, E-R-I-C-K. Do it at checkout. Go to EdenPureDeals.com. Eden, like the Garden of Eden. Your room will smell like the Garden of Eden. EdenPureDeals.com. Y'all, you're not going to have itchy, watery eyes, runny nose, sneezing. Listen, I can attest. I wish my son were not in school while I did this program because I'd have him behind the microphone telling you that he was waking up with a snoggy nose in the morning, but now he runs the Eden Pure Thunderstorm in his room at night, and he doesn't. I have had to move one into my office. You may hear it whirring in the background. Super quiet, so probably not, but I keep it in here, and it also oxygen or ozone produces ozone, cleans the bacteria, cleans the mold, gets the pollen out, and it's a lifesaver for me doing 6 nonstop hours of radio right now with sore throat and all, and an allergy season, having a hard time being able to go get my allergy shots. It is a lifesaver. EdenPureDeals.com. You'll get $10 off the lowest sales price if you use my name, Erick, at checkout. All right. Let's see. Planned Parenthood has confessed. This is from Alexis McGill Johnson, the president and chief executive of Planned Parenthood Federation of America. I'm the head of Planned Parenthood. We're done making excuses for our founder. That's the title of this piece in the New York Times. The subtitle, We Must Reckon with Margaret Sanger's Association with White Supremacy Groups and Eugenics. The president of Planned Parenthood has now come out and written in the New York Times about Margaret Sanger. She writes, we need to talk about Margaret Sanger. For the 11 years I've been involved with Planned Parenthood, founded by Sanger, her legacy on race has been debated. Sanger, a nurse, opened the nation's first birth control clinic in Brownsville, Brooklyn in 1916 and dedicated her life to promoting birth control to improve women's lives. But was she or was she not racist? Sanger spoke to the Women's Auxiliary of the Ku Klux Klan at a rally in New Jersey to generate support for birth control. And even though she eventually distanced herself from the eugenics movement because of its hard turn to explicit racism, she endorsed the Supreme Court's 1927 decision in Buck versus Bell, which allowed states to sterilize people deemed unfit without their consent and sometimes without their knowledge, a ruling that led to the sterilization of tens of thousands of people in the 20th century. The first human trials of the birth control pill, a project that was Sanger's passion later in her life, were conducted with her backing in Puerto Rico, where as many as 1,500 women were not told that the drug was experimental or that they might experience dangerous side effects. We don't know what was in Sanger's heart, and we don't need to in order to condemn her harmful choices. What we have is a history of focusing on white womanhood relentlessly. Whether our founder was a racist or not is a simple yes, not a simple yes or no question. Our reckoning is understanding her full legacy and its impact. Our reckoning is the work that comes next, and the first step is making Margaret Sanger less prominent in our present and our future. The Planned Parenthood Federation of America has already renamed awards previously given in her honor, and Planned Parenthood of Greater New York renamed its Manhattan Health Center in 2020. Other independently managed affiliates may choose to follow. We will no longer make excuses or apologize for Margaret Sanger's actions. But we can't simply call her racist, scrub her from our history, and move on. We must examine how we have perpetuated her harms over the last century, as an organization, an institution, and as individuals. Now, what's so notable about this? What's so notable about this is that NPR defended Planned Parenthood and dismissed the claims about Margaret Sanger. Snopes.com defended Planned Parenthood and dismissed the concerns about Margaret Sanger. Virtually every major media fact-checking organization in the United States has circled the wagons around Planned Parenthood and said the claims about Margaret Sanger simply are not true. And now here comes the president of the Planned Parenthood Federation of America and says, yes, they are. The fact-checkers defended Planned Parenthood, now throwing the fact-checkers under the bus, as they should. But we should also remember, despite their spin, Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry disproportionately prey on black women in this country to this day, just as Margaret Sanger would have wanted. You can't ignore that fact, and the fact-checkers can't cover that